Hi, my name is Andrew Yeager-Buckley, and I serve as the Director of Operations for Worship Times. I'm also a ruling elder and member of Central Presbyterian Church in Louisville, Kentucky, where I helped manage our church's transition from in-person worship to live streaming through Zoom back in March. The title of this presentation is Producing Digital Worship, and over the last 4 months I've personally gone through a sort of digital worship boot camp like many of you. I'm going to cover a variety of topics related to producing a digital worship experience, such as planning, streaming platforms, equipment recommendations, and suggestions for working with digital content you plan on sharing as part of your service. We'll end our time with a collection of my own tips and tricks and best practices related to your audio and video setup to help ensure the best quality possible. Successful and sustainable digital worship involves a team. Church production teams are underrated. I'm talking about those volunteers that are staff that run your sound, lighting, and cameras. When they do their job right, nobody notices. But when they make a mistake, everyone notices. A strong production team is key to having a smooth and compelling worship experience. Some worship leaders question whether it's theologically appropriate to care about high-quality production in church. The word production sounds commercial, but the origin of the word comes from the Latin word producere, which means to bring forth. In our worship services, we should bring forth our best. God has gifted us with light and sound. When we worship, we also want to bring forth the message of the gospel in a clear and compelling way, and not a distracting way. Building a strong production team helps you bring forth the gospel message to your community of faith, whether it's in person, online, or a little bit of both. All too often, the conversations around producing a digital worship service immediately go to cameras, microphones, and streaming platforms. It's natural to want to go there first, but what really needs to be discussed first is your planning. For most churches, envisioning digital worship means a lot of new things. New approaches to how you plan worship so that it can be adapted for both in-person and a digital audience. New volunteer commitments, new equipment and software that has to be used, and the list of what's defined as new goes on and on. There's just so much. Being open and fully leaning into these opportunities of innovation are so important right now. It's tempting to get caught up in the moment thinking that we need to accomplish everything that we dream up, or to begin to use the list of what neighboring churches are offering as a measuring stick of what's success or failure, right or wrong. It's important to find that balance between innovation and authenticity. I'm a big fan of taking an honest look at all the possible tools that are available, but in the end, you've got to choose the approach that makes your digital worship an extension or an honest expression of who you are as a congregation. If using the new and shiny feature, whatever it is going to be a distraction, don't do it at first. Wait. Wait until you've had time to practice using it and find a way to introduce it in a natural way. Each congregation's worship experience is kind of like its own ecosystem, and you don't want to do anything to shock the system too quickly. At the same time, though, I encourage you to take on this moment and some of the challenges and new opportunities it will present. These last few months have been the ultimate challenge. I laugh when I think about the conversations we've had during session meetings over the years where some type of decision that would have brought about a significant change was defined as a little too much too fast. In many ways, I think that we've learned that our members are capable of a lot more than we give them credit for. I've been amazed at some of the folks that have figured out how to sign into Zoom on their cell phones, and others that are experiencing podcasts for the very first time. In some ways, placing the word digital or virtual before the word worship can sometimes just be a complete distraction. When all is said and done, we're talking about worship planning, worship being offered through a digital space. I feel like I wouldn't be a good Presbyterian if in this moment I didn't quote from the Book of Order. This section on worship space comes from chapter 1 in the Directory for Worship. Because heaven and earth belong to God, we may worship in any place. The Old Testament describes stone altars, tabernacles, temples, and other places where the people gathered and encountered God. The Gospels tell us that Jesus worshipped at the synagogue and temple, but he also worshipped in the wilderness, on hillsides, and at lake shores, demonstrating that God cannot be confined to any one place. It's critical to establish a consistent workflow for all leaders involved in the worship planning process. This is you really want to have a weekly worship planning meeting. This is a time when your worship planning team meets to review the previous Sunday's service and finalize their plan for the upcoming Sunday. I know this may sound obvious, but I know a lot of churches, and not all churches, that have this rhythm of actually reviewing each week. But with digital worship, I find it to be really important. As part of the planning of the service, decisions need to be made on any supporting media, slides, videos, audio that need to be created or gathered for the service. It's important that this initial meeting occurs early in the week because with digital worship, there's more prep work that needs to be done, especially for those of you that record your service in advance. After that worship planning meeting, invitations need to go out right away to anyone that will be serving in any type of leadership capacity during the next service. If a family is being invited to lead any type of opening gathering ritual, such as the lighting of the Christ candle, or the scripture reading is going to be done including multiple readers, those invitations need to go out as soon as possible so they can be confirmed before the final tech rehearsal and that the technical director can be made of those types of unique elements in the service. If any pre-recorded music or videos are being played as part of the service, you've got to set hard deadlines for when that content needs to be submitted to the technical director. It should be at the very least before the final rehearsal so that it can be tested and worship leadership can verify it's what they expected or what they want. Having a weekly worship production meeting or tech rehearsal is critical. Invite all worship leaders, digital greeters, and anyone else that's playing a role in the service to be part of a tech rehearsal. This is important whether your service is pre-recorded or live. You should have a dedicated time with all the worship leaders and members of the tech team to walk through the different elements of the service, verifying all transitions and making sure all content has been received. These are often the moments when walking through the full service together with all the audio and video that our team has figured out that certain elements just can't be back to back. Or we figure out that a particular slide is just unnecessary, and so we can remove it. Create a script with technical notes. Most churches have a different version of the bulletin that's created for worship leaders. That's not a new concept. It often includes all the prayers being used, particular cues or prompts as to when certain elements of the service are to begin. What's needed for digital worship is all of that with the inclusion of technical notes and cues. This includes every transition, whose microphones need to be muted or unmuted at any given time, what slide should be showing, how many seconds after a prayer should a song start being played. Everything. It's a document that should be distributed to everyone playing a role in leading the service. We've had a good experience sharing that through Google Docs, and then during our tech rehearsal, we're able to make live edits to it together. So I'm going to take just a few moments to talk about kind of the conversation that continues to bounce around on whether or not you should go with a live service or pre-recorded. And so I'm just going to hit with a few tips on each. This was a hot conversation early on with passionate opinions on both sides. Some believe worshiping live has a unique energy and a more authentic experience. It allows for last-minute changes in the message or the inclusion of important announcements that if you pre-recorded, those changes just wouldn't be possible. Live also means a need for more patience. There will be mistakes, and to be honest, that's really okay. Now, if your worship plan is complex, including multiple leaders, special music, and a number of moving parts, then I'd probably encourage you to pre-record. A pre-recorded service could allow greater flexibility for those participating in the service to record their portion whenever they want to. I know a number of churches that have made this decision because leading worship from the sanctuary was a priority, but they didn't have high-speed internet at the church, so live streaming wasn't going to be an option. Live could also be problematic for those communities that don't have access to high-speed internet, so pre-recording might be the best solution. The next step is to choose a streaming platform that will allow your community to view your worship service online. Video conferencing systems like Zoom or Google Meet and various other systems available make sense for churches that are planning a live service with multiple worship leaders in different locations. They make it easy to switch between different leaders while also providing a real feeling of virtual community. If your worship plan only includes one leader, then streaming directly through Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo could work for you. For those pre-recording services, YouTube, Vimeo, and even your Facebook page could be used to host that video and make it available for playing. You can upload in advance and then schedule that particular worship service to premiere or go live at a set time. At that appointed time, the video will begin to play and participants can interact live via the chat feature. No single approach is going to be the perfect fit for everyone. At our church, seeing familiar faces and hearing the voices of fellow members before, during, and after the service was an absolute need. That was established as a priority from the beginning, and my recommendation on what tools we should use was informed by that. For some, it might be offering a worship experience that's hosted in the physical worship space in your church. So that would mean whether you pre-record or stream live, having worship leaders use that space as the backdrop is important. During this time of social distancing and being away from the church, seeing the space could be really comforting to some. For those that were looking for a solid solution to kick off your digital worship offerings back in March, the various free options available made the most sense. They were the easiest to jump into quickly. Since most churches are now looking to continue a digital worship offering for the long term, I'd highly encourage you to research some of the premium streaming services available. Companies like Vimeo and Sermon.net, just to name a few, offer dedicated support and a higher quality stream. They make it easy to embed that live player on your church's website as well. Most contemporary streaming providers have integrations set up so that you can continue to stream simultaneously through Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and other various social media platforms. Create a dedicated page on your website for everything related to your digital worship. This dedicated page is where your live stream would be placed, it would be embedded, and links to access videos of previous worship services or other events could be found there as well. During a service when you want to play audio or video files, I strongly encourage your lead technician to play those directly off their computer and not mess around with inserting into PowerPoint or any other presentation software you might be using. I'm all about finding ways to decrease the risk of technical failures. Even though Zoom and other platforms allow for the playing of videos through YouTube or other services, I would discourage you from doing it. Whenever possible, download whatever video or audio content you want to share during the service directly onto your local computer and play from that device. In this next section, I'm going to offer some best practices when it comes to your video and audio setup. If you're using a tablet, laptop, or desktop as your primary streaming or recording device, purchase an external camera. An external camera that can be mounted on a secure and stable tripod or hooked onto the top edge of an external monitor. That's actually what I have right now today. There's nothing more distracting than the feeling that your worship leader is rocking around on a boat. Also, internal cameras pick up every vibration from a book being put down on the table to an air conditioner kicking in. They don't deal well with the extremes, bright glares or real low light spaces. Your camera should be positioned as close to whoever is speaking as possible. If you're filming in your church, I understand wanting to provide the view of the space during worship. If that's a priority, then you might need to have two camera locations that you switch between during different moments in the service. When a leader is speaking, you really want to be focused in on the leader as much as possible. I'm not talking about an extreme close-up, but close enough so the participants can easily see their face as they speak and make, that real connection. Think about framing the shot as close as you would when having a headshot taken with a point-and-shoot camera. Most web cameras are really only built to provide a high-quality picture from just a few feet away. And even if they do provide a zoom feature, don't use it. Often, that zoom feature, if you use it, you'll notice that you lose quality very quickly. Standalone video cameras and other high-end cameras can allow for zooming in from a distance without compromising the quality of the image. No matter how well your camera works in low light conditions, you can still end up with an image with low brightness and deep shadows if the light in your office or sanctuary is too faded. This is where installing additional lighting may come to the rescue. Many churches have some type of theatrical lighting system installed to achieve good illumination in the chancel area so that those attending can clearly see what's happening during the service. When these same churches decided to start recording or broadcasting their services, they found the look of their video doesn't compare to what's seen when attending in person. In some cases, it actually looks pretty bad. For those new to video production, this can be very confusing, and some may assume that their video equipment is inadequate. While camera quality could be an issue, there's a really good chance that the problem is due to lighting. Camera lenses see things differently than the human eye does. Our brains work to interpret what our eyes see, and in that moment they make automatic adjustments to balance and exposure. A camera records exactly what it sees. What you see in the sanctuary with your eyes and what you can see on the screen can be very different. If your sanctuary faces east and in the morning sun shines through stained glass windows behind the chancel area, proper lighting is going to be even more critical. Without it, you'll have difficulty capturing your worship leaders' faces because the camera will overestimate how bright the area is. Proper lighting of large spaces like a sanctuary or a fellowship hall is going to require some professional assistance. Now, here are some tips if your setup is in your office or another type of smaller space. When at all possible, select a space for filming that offers some natural light. You want that light facing you and not at your back. Position lights or lamps so that they are facing the subject of the video, so that they're facing you. Set up light sources angled towards the subject from two sides, forming a triangle with the subject. So now in this case, I have a light to my left and I have a lamp to my right. I don't have any professional lighting in here, but I knew that if I didn't have both of these, probably this part of my face would be really dark. And so I've set up kind of my own little setup here. But it's important to try to make the picture as bright as possible. This helps minimize shadows being cast across the face. Traditional lamps can work a little. They aren't built for this, but they can work. I just want to offer one example of a basic lighting gadget called a ring light that could be a good option. A ring light is a circular light that fits around your camera lens, providing even illumination for whatever you're shooting. You want to purchase one that includes a dimmer so that you can adjust the brightness as needed. If you've ever watched the news, morning shows, or even some of the late night programs now, these are the lights that they're using often. Every once in a while they'll show a cutaway shot of their basement studio or wherever they're filming, and you'll notice these lights. And so this is a really good choice. And some of the options that are available start at as little as around $50, and it could be something that you might want to consider. Bad video is much more forgiving than bad audio. I'm going to make a bold statement, but I strongly believe that the audio for a live stream is much more important than the video. Audio is not an area where you want to cut any corners. If your audio quality is decent and your video is so-so, I'll probably stick around. But if your audio is terrible, I don't care how good the video is, I'm leaving. If you're not filming in a space with a sound system where you could pull sound directly from that board, then you're going to require a good external microphone. No matter what type of device you're using to film your service, I don't recommend ever using the built-in microphone. Issues with internal microphones are similar to what I raised about internal cameras earlier. They don't deal well with ambient noises. You can find external microphones for phones and a wide array of external microphones for your tablets, laptops, or desktop computers. Most will come with some type of microphone stand which you should use. There are wireless Bluetooth and USB microphones. A wired connection will always be the safer and higher quality route. This is no different than the fact that a wired Ethernet connection will give you a faster and more stable internet connection than Wi-Fi. So I just want to offer some final thoughts. Communicate whatever your plan is early. Send out those email reminders to your team, to folks that you've invited to be part of your service. Create and post a Facebook event for each week's service. And use your phone tree to call members who aren't on email or social media to let them know what the plan is. Communicate, communicate, communicate. That's a really big piece of making sure that this kind of digital worship offering is a success, and so that no one from the community is left behind. Focus your energy and efforts. If you traditionally have multiple services, honestly, just hold on to one for the time being. Record the service for those who may not be able to participate in the live version, and find ways to help them access that recording later. Educate yourself on copyright rules. There are a number of things you can do in a traditional in-person service that your current copyright that you probably, or whatever license your church currently holds, was already covering. But when you begin to record or live stream a service, those rules change, so do your research. Take the time to learn the limits of the technology you're using. As we've already discussed, getting good sound can be complicated. Using the built-in microphone on your phone, tablet, or webcam will pick up all sorts of ambient noise and can cause distractions. Whether you're recording or live streaming in your sanctuary or dining room table, pull sound directly from your soundboard or use an external microphone. This can be as simple as a headset or earbuds that came with your phone. When testing your live stream setup, be sure to use the types of devices your members will be using to get a sense of what you have to remember to really get a sense of what the experience will be for your members. Most of them will be listening through computers with the built-in speakers or inexpensive headphones. And so if you're running a test and you're listening to it on a high quality speakers, that's not a good example of what their experience is going to be. At some point while working on your plan and you ever have to cut expenses, don't cut corners on the audio. I know it's like a broken record, but I'm passionate about it. And finally, learn from your church family. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. Each of you has been working on this for a few months now and has learned so much. Identify neighboring churches in your presbytery that have taken the same approach and reach out to them. We don't have to go through this journey alone. I hope this was helpful, and take care. God bless. Bye-bye.